Hello and welcome back to Grief, the emotional shitstorm you never signed up for. Today, we are going to be talking about divorce and mediation and all the grief that comes around that. And I have a very special guest, a really good friend of mine, Dominique Laundry, and she is going to be talking to us about her experience working in divorce and mediation. But let me introduce Dominique to you now. So, Dominique, welcome. First of all, thank you for being here today. And for everyone listening, Dominique is a heart centered divorce strategist and conscious relationship coach. She combines over 3 decades of expertise in family law, a decade in divorce mediation, and a profound commitment as a high performance coach to support her clients through every stage of their divorce journey. With a background enriched by both personal and professional experience, she offers a unique blend of legal guidance and life coaching that empowers her clients to navigate their divorce with clarity and intention. She has a very unconventional approach, which integrates practical legal strategies with insightful coaching while prioritizing communication and relationships as the cornerstone to navigating divorce without regret. I don't know if anyone's had that. I think that's very rare. Dominique's work is grounded in the belief that divorce can be a catalyst for positive change, guiding her clients to rediscover their sense of self and build a fulfilling life post-divorce. Welcome, Dominique. I love that.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. That's a long bio.
Yeah, but you know what? It works. It works. It gives everyone an idea of who you are and where you've come from and why you are the person to talk to when it comes to divorce. And you've had the experience on both the legal side and the mediation side and the coaching side. So you see the different facets and things that people go through in all of those areas. So tell me a little bit more about what you love about what you do. And then we're going to
What I
dive in a little
love,
bit later after into the grief side of it.
what I love about what I do. I love, I think one of the things that I love most about my work is that I always say to my clients, I have the best seat in the house. So because I work with relationship coaching and with mediation clients, I work with couples.
Mhm.
But in my work with couples, I meet with them individually and I meet with them together. And so it always amazes me how open and vulnerable my clients are willing to be so that with me, so that I can understand, you know, what their concerns are and what's important to them. That's key to being able to do the work I do. And they're always so willing to be vulnerable and to I say bare your soul to what is at first a complete stranger, right? And so I never take that lightly, no matter how many families I work with. In those first few sessions, when those strangers are coming to you willing to, because that's how important it is for them to find a solution, right? They're
Mhm.
willing to bare their soul to a
Yeah.
stranger. And of course, the more they are honest with me, the better outcome, I can help them achieve. So I think, is that what I love the most? It's certainly what I feel the most honored, like, and what is never lost on me.
Mhm.
I love the work because I love helping people. I love seeing the difference from how clients even hold themselves when they first come in the door for that first meeting. They really do transform when we
Mhm.
get to the end of our work together. They just hold themselves different. They interact with each other differently. They're just, it's powerful to see. Yeah.
Mhm. And so what got you into this type of work?
Mm.
How did you land in this space?
Well, so I've been a lawyer for 30 some years. And when I first started my practice, I sort of fell into family law.
Mhm.
And that many years ago, mediation wasn't really popular, certainly not on the
Mhm.
east coast of Canada, where I am, a little more on the west coast. And so I fell into the traditional adversarial approach to family law with a lawyer on one side representing one spouse and a lawyer on the other side. And there really were two sides. And even though I was who I am, so I still tried to take a more conciliatory approach.
Mhm.
Most lawyers wouldn't play in that sandbox. And
Mhm.
so it was always really very unfulfilling. And I always felt, whether you won your case or not, I always felt like I was leaving my clients worse off than when they first came to me. And so I did that for 10 years. And then I went to government for 10 years to see if I could make a difference there. FYI, government is the last place to go if you want to make a difference. So in the end, the last few months of my position with the provincial government, I managed a staff at that point of 10 or 12 people, and so I went on this introduction to mediation course so that I could help manage conflict amongst my staff members.
Mhm.
And so that was my first real introduction to mediation, and I fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this I could do. I remember thinking, it was, I went for one training and came back and talked to my supervisor and said, this is the most incredible thing I've ever learned. I need to go back and I need to do more. And so I did, mostly on my dime. And I remember I was in the middle of a 3-day training. I was on day 2 of 3-day training, driving to the training site, thinking to myself, I think I would do this work for free. This feels like the type of work that you can really make a difference. And so I fell in love with it, got back to the office, gave my 6-month notice, and then started my mediation practice in the spring of 2013. And learned, I mean, my mediation clients taught me so much about relationships.
Mhm.
And because really, when we're, as a mediator, I'm helping my clients transition or separate their marriage relationship, their romantic relationship, from their co-parenting relationship, so you can bring one to completion without blowing the other one up. That's
Mhm.
what mediation is, right? It's separating the two carefully so that you can bring one to completion without completely destroying the co-parenting relationship, because the traditional adversarial process just blows the whole thing up. They don't bother trying to extricate one from the other.
Mhm.
And so in in doing that work, I quickly realized that the secret to a successful post separation co parenting relationship is the same secret to any relationship. And before long, it morphed into relationship coaching. And at first, I was resistant to it, but um, people just kept coming to me for relationship coaching. And I was like, well, I mean, I can do it. As I said, the formula is the same.
Mhm.
Um, and I love the idea of the other piece that was really striking to me surprising to me in doing my mediation work, when I would meet individually
Mhm.
with each spouse in the couple. So often, like I want to say at least half of the time, you would hear them say, both of them separately, not in the same room, that they didn't really want the relationship to end. They just couldn't keep doing what they were doing. They couldn't keep the dynamic the way it was. It wasn't sustainable, but they didn't know how to fix it. So their options were leave it the same or end it. And so here they were in the lawyer's office, in the mediator's office, ending it. But they weren't, it's not because the relationship wasn't salvageable, right? And so it was, it feels so good to be able to um, meet my relationship coaching clients earlier in their journey,
Mhm.
and be able to give them a chance, or you just have more options, right? You have more options to decide whether you want to work on repairing the romantic relationship, or just accept that it's run its course and bring it to a close with, with grace and compassion, which allows you then to really allow the co-parenting relationship to flourish. Oftentimes, when a marriage is unraveling and the spouses are trying to get some space and create some distance between the two of them as spouses,
Mhm.
they also create space between them as parents. And
Mhm.
so the parenting piece can suffer as the relationship is unraveling. And so sometimes there's some repair that has to be done there. And I also work with clients who are, after they're separated and divorced, and as kids grow older and things change, to help them tweak and tend to their co-parenting relationship, so that they can um, maintain a high level of cooperation, even despite the changes. New spouses, remarriage, blended families, grandchildren, all the things. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. So you've seen quite a bit in your offices over the years, then, for sure. I would love for you to speak to, since we're all about grief on this channel, speak to the grief that you see that comes through the office as well, that comes through your doors, because it's great for people to come to a point where, you know what, maybe we're going to reconcile, maybe we're going to give this a go, or you know what, now we're actually going to end this relationship. And so there is a
Mhm.
grieving period around that. There's a grief about the
Mhm.
loss of the relationship, the loss of what you wanted, the expectations, what happens with the children. Like there's a whole grief piece. So, how does that show up for you when you're
Mm.
with your clients? Can you speak to that?
One of the aspects of grief that I've learned from my mediation clients that I don't think I was aware of before as a family lawyer, because of course you're just working with one person, right? And even going through, I was 10, I'd been a lawyer for, well, I went through my own divorce right around the same time that I started working for government, right around that 10-year mark. So I'd been practicing family law for 10 years,
Hmm.
and you think you know what your clients are going through, and you don't until you go through it yourself. You really don't. No matter how hard you try, they don't teach you that
Right.
in law school or anywhere else. So one of the things I learned fairly early on was that um, the person. So when a marriage comes to an end, when a couple decides that they're going to separate, usually what happens is one of the spouses will be the one to initiate that conversation.
Hmm.
And the spouse that initiates the separation conversation, what I learned is that they've already been through a grieving process. So what happens is one spouse, when I'm sure you've talked on your other podcast episodes about the stages of grief, but like, how the initial triggering change
Hmm.
that triggers the grief process. Well, that's when the one of the spouses first realizes, I don't think this marriage is going to last. I don't think this is where I want to remain. When they first have that realization, and they can't shake it, like the one that sticks, like the thought might occur to you, and but then time goes by, and the thought might occur to you again, but then it gets better and time goes by. But that time, you know it, I know it, that
Hmm.
time when you're like, I can't shake it, it's not going away. So what ends up happening is, in that at during that time, that spouse goes through all the stages of grief: the anger, the denial, the bargaining, the despair. And it's only when they reach a level of acceptance and they realize, right, there's
Hmm.
nothing I can do about this. The only option is separation. It's only when they reach that level of acceptance that's when they have the conversation with the other spouse. And that's what triggers the other spouse's grieving process.
Right.
So what ends up happening is the spouse who initiates the conversation is ahead of the other spouse in the grieving process.
Hmm.
Now, when they have the conversation with the spouse, they go through it again, but it's shorter, it's quicker, it's not quite as deep, as profound, right? The valley of despair
Hmm.
isn't nearly as deep as the first time.
Right.
And so what happens is when a couple will, reach out to me for mediation and I'm meeting with them, it's almost always very clear who was the initiating spouse. You can tell in their demeanor, in the way they hold themselves, in the way they talk about the separation, whether or not they've both reached a level of acceptance yet.
Hmm.
And what you'll see sometimes is, of course, the spouses aren't aware of this. I wasn't aware of it until I, was really like neck deep in the work. And so you'll find The spouse who's further ahead is like, okay, let's get this done, right? They've
Mhm.
gone through the grieving process. So they're like, let's move on. Like, what's taking so long? Why are you resistant? And so the spouse who the second spouse, the spouse who didn't do the initiating, because they're not as far along, they haven't reached a level of acceptance yet. They're still in the anger and the denial and the bargaining. Yeah, you can see it. You can watch it play out in the verbiage. And the only thing you can do is like call attention to it, let them know this is what's going on, right? You got to let them catch up. You've
Mhm.
got to give them some time. You're further ahead. You were where they are right now. You were going through those stages, but you've worked through it.
Right.
And if you push it, if you try to force it and push them to come to the mediation table before they're really ready, it's just going to take longer and just be a little bit messier. So
Mhm.
the best thing you can do is just hold space for that and give everyone the time they need to reach that level of acceptance. The mediation process itself goes so much easier because it's so much easier to manage emotions when you're not in the thick of that grieving process. Yeah. And the other piece, of course, is that it really, it sounds cliched to say it, but you really never go through it in a linear fashion and it's
Don't.
but that's what progress is, right? That's the other thing is sometimes I love to use analogies with my clients because I think sometimes we need to get distance
Mhm.
from the expression you can't read the label from inside the can.
Okay, yes, yes.
Right. So sometimes you got to give your client some distance so they can understand what the heck is going on. And so I tell them that the grief model is also the universal change model, right? So the companies use it in corporate reorganization.
Mhm.
Whether you're dealing with separation and divorce, or whether you've lost your job, or whether you're going through a big transition at work,
Mhm.
the grieving process is something you have to go through, and it's not meant to be linear. It is meant to be messy and kind of like a two steps forward, one step back. And again, what I find is when you explain that to clients, and sometimes clients are even surprised to know that we talk about this stuff every day, all day, so we know it, but it surprises me how many clients going through separation and divorce don't realize that they're going through the same stages they would as if they'd lost, a parent.
Mhm.
And so just explaining it to them and normalizing it
Mhm.
brings the emotions down, and it helps them to understand the other person's, behavior. So if they're meeting with some resistance, they can understand what's going on. And
Mhm.
I mean, once if you can understand why someone is responding or reacting the way they are, it's so much easier to uh, accept it and work with it instead of working, against it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I love what you were talking about there, that grief is not a linear process, because that is
Mm.
so true. And everyone's experience of grief is different. So even though this couple is coming into this separation and divorce, how they both experience that as grief is going to be very different because they come at it with their own experiences, their own personality, their own way of being. And when you were talking about how the one who initiates has already grieved, that's what I went through. It took me 5 years to leave my marriage from the moment I thought about it to the moment I walked out the door.
Right.
Yes, I grieved after I left, but I don't think I grieved as much as if he had come to me and said it's over, right? Out of the blue. Because I think it's that shock and that unexpectedness too that really can send you for a reeling. And really questioning, like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working? What's going on? And it's that whole grief of what I perceived anyway, from my own perception, my own experience, was that grief of losing the dream of what you thought you were going to have for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
This happily ever after, or at least ever after. I don't think marriage is always 100% happy, but it's that whole idea of, I married you forever and this is our life. And then that changes. And there's that grief about that loss, and grief being any loss or change. So I love how you explain that to your clients, that you're actually grieving the loss of what like it is grief. It's not just, and I think their anger or their sadness that they haven't really, like you said, labeled that emotion can make it really difficult. It can make it very
Yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. And to help them just if even if it helps them understand their own behavior and the other person's behavior, right? I have this story about this tenured university professor who came to me. And she was, this smart, confident, accomplished woman. And she came to me at the end of a long relationship, I don't know, like 17, 18 years. And she was sobbing, uh, talking to me about how mortified she was that when she found out that her spouse had been having an affair or had been unfaithful, she took all of his clothes and threw them over the balcony outside the bedroom door out onto the back lawn. And she was like mortified. And I was able to explain to her that unfortunately that's normal.
Yeah.
That's fight or flight. That's your
Yeah.
brain responding, right, to what you're experiencing.
Hmm.
And to be able to normalize once she realized, okay, she wasn't proud of it, but she was actually ashamed of herself. She
Hmm.
thought that that was a reflection of who she is. You know the difference between
Yeah.
shame and guilt, right?
Yes.
She felt bad about it, and she probably should feel bad about it. But when I could normalize it for her and she could understand where her behavior came from, she was able to be compassionate with herself,
Hmm.
and it helped her to understand, how he might respond then, in the coming months or as we moved forward in the mediation.
Hmm.
And it made it I I think that sometimes just helping our clients understand that what they're experiencing is normal,
Hmm.
um, really helps to take some of that sting or the fear. It
Hmm.
takes the fear away because, and of course, fear is the thing that puts us in fight or flight, and that makes it so much easier to navigate. So it takes a really difficult um, life transition, and it makes it just a little bit easier when you can help them understand that what they're experiencing, what they're feeling is normal, and to not resist it. Because of course, as you know, the more you resist, the longer it persists. And so if you can just accept it as normal, it actually comes and then flows through, and then
Hmm.
you can get down to making some really sound decisions. Because of course you can't make good long-term decisions as long as you're in the throes of that, right? So the sooner you can get through that grieving process, the sooner you can make some decisions and um, start to think about the future, right? Start to move into once you get past acceptance, only then can you move on. And here's something else I think we should probably mention. Um, Not everyone moves through.
No.
Some people stay stuck for years.
Hmm.
Years.
Yeah.
We all know, that one person who's miserable and alone and hates the world, and that's just someone who's stuck in grief.
Hmm.
They're stuck in that valley of despair. And it's my hope is when you bring awareness to our clients that that's why they're feeling what they're feeling, they'll be less likely to stay stuck because they'll be like, oh, okay, these are the stages. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm ready for acceptance now,
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting when you talk about the stages because I actually am on the other side and I'm like, not so sure I agree with the stages, but I think they help to explain what people are feeling as they're going through things. And then, like you said, it's not linear. It could be back and forth and back and forth. And it gives language to people so that they understand how they're feeling, where they're at, where they're getting to. Um, but also understanding that grief, like that loss, that separation in the divorce, in the of the relationship, they're always going to carry that loss with them on some level as a bit of grief, right? They'll accept it, they'll be ready to move forward, but they'll still kind of carry that little nugget of sadness inside of them. And I think that needs to be normalized as well, because what some of the clients I've worked with who are divorced and remarried, there's still a little part of them sometimes that they feel like they feel like they're cheating on their ex-spouse. There's still that sense of, I've lost that. I'm um still sad about that relationship not working. And there's still that grief over the losing of that particular relationship, especially if it was the first committed relationship you've been in and you kind of put all your eggs into one basket, right? Especially when you're younger and you're like, I'm getting married and I'm so excited and this is the love of my life and it's going to be wonderful. And you just pour everything into it. And when that gets taken away, it leaves a mark, right? I believe fully that, our body internalizes that. It becomes part of who we are. And so we still carry a bit of that. But it's once we've been able to process those emotions, like you were talking about, going through, feeling the different things, being angry and getting to a point where you're accepting. I wouldn't say accepting the grief so much as accepting the circumstance. Is that fair? Where there's that
Right.
acceptance of, I'm going to accept now that this is over, that I'm okay, now I'm ready to move forward. But you're very, very correct. Like I love how you talk about the acceptance piece, because I think when people are stuck in grief, they can't see forward into that part of accepting, right? That
No.
part, because they do, when we're in our emotions, we can't make decisions. That's why they say to somebody, if you lose a spouse, as opposed to divorce, if you lose a spouse, your spouse passes away, don't make big decisions in the first 3 months to a year minimum. Don't pack up and move to Bali, because you're not thinking straight. You can't think when you're full of emotion, even though scientifically it's been proven all of our decisions are emotionally based. On some level, we make the decision based on emotion, but we logic it out as to why we're going to do it, right? We start with the emotion, we logic it out. Getting to a point where we have calmer emotions, getting to a point where we feel a little bit more stable and clear-headed as opposed to clouded, that is a great place to be when you're coming into mediation, when you're getting into
Yeah.
moving forward.
One of the things that I think is really important to highlight is that the work that I do with my clients, as you said in the introduction, is that I help my clients navigate divorce without regret. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, when people first hear that, they think, oh, I didn't regret my divorce. I wouldn't. It's not necessarily the divorce or the decision or the outcome that you regret. But what I've learned is how you decide,
Mm-hmm.
how you bring the conversation up to your spouse, how you tell your children, how you make your decisions, financial, legal, practical, how you move forward afterwards, how you grieve it, how you approach your next relationship. All of those hows, all of those
Mm-hmm.
different aspects, there's room for regret in
Mm-hmm.
each of those decisions and actions along the way. So one can know that they made the right decision, and and have acceptance over the fact that the relationship is over, and feel good about that, like reach a level of acceptance with the decision. But that little piece of grief that you're talking about that might hold on, that little bit of sadness, I think in a lot of cases, it's regret for how it was done, not the fact that it was done, but how it was done. I think that's sometimes that little piece of sadness that we hold on to. And I think that's why it's so important. I mean, I work with clients at all stages,
Mm-hmm.
but my favorite thing to do is to be able to work with someone who's in that deciding stage, um, for a whole bunch of reasons, because there is a better way to make that decision, to arrive at that decision that allows you to um, minimize your chance of having any regret about any of it, or
Mm-hmm.
holding on to any of that little, sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you shared that. The idea of regret. The last thing you want to do is walk away with regret. So yeah, I love that that's a main focus within what you do. Well, Dominique, this has been a lovely conversation. I've really enjoyed you sharing everything that you have, and I'm hoping our listeners have picked up a lot of really good nuggets, either for themselves or for someone that they know. Is there any last piece of advice or suggestion you would like to share with them before we sign off for today?
I think probably if there had to be one takeaway, I would hope that um, the listeners would take away from our discussion that um, whatever you're feeling, it's never wrong.
Mm,
Feelings are never wrong. There are feelings that serve us and feelings that serve a purpose for us. And and by feeling those feelings, instead of resisting those feelings, they will pass when those feelings no longer serve us.
mhm,
Resisting causes us to sort of grip, and then we hold on to them beyond the point of where then they're holding us back. They're not helping us heal. They're actually preventing us from moving forward, because just that one thing that we haven't touched on is that what's so powerful about the grief model and the universal change curve, which is follows the exact same model, is that you'll notice that the when you see the diagram anywhere, Google it anywhere, the change, your level of functioning is here before when the change occurs. And after you go through the grieving process, your level of functioning is here. There's a post-traumatic growth is real.
mhm,
And if you allow it, you can come through the other side stronger and wiser and really better off as a result of it.
mhm.
And I think that's the hope that you want people to cling to, so that they won't stay stuck in that yucky valley of despair. Yeah.
I love that. All feelings are valid. Something I
All
say
feelings are
all the
valid.
time, all the time. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Dominique. I really,
It was
really enjoyed
fun.
the conversation, and I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And thank you all for joining us today. We've enjoyed having you here as well, and we will look forward to seeing you next time on Grief, the emotional shitstorm you never signed up for.